Good morning and welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha and I'm here with our family of seekers, which has expanded since our retreat, and I'm loving it. Thank you for coming live and taking this journey with us through the Bhagavad Gita. We're seekers of truth and we're studying the Bhagavad Gita one verse at a time, trying to derive the nectar from these verses and apply it to our lives. So we're in chapter 7 today. If you want to follow along with us, you can. If not, I flashed the verses on the screen as well, so no need. But we're in chapter 7, and I think we're verse 24 is where we're going to start. Verse 24. And we're in this section of the Gita. We're in this section of chapter 7, rather. We're in the Bhakti Yoga section of the Gita, which is the middle section. So text 7 through 12. It's like the Bhakti Yoga section. And the part that we're in the seventh chapter is the seventh chapter is a lot about surrender. We talk a lot about surrender. We talk about people who surrender. We talk about those people that don't surrender. Right now, we're in this section of chapter 7 when we're talking about people that surrender to something other than Supreme God. So in the last class, we talked about surrender to demigods, right? In relationship with demigods, when people approach demigods for temporary things in material life, right? To receive blessings from them, right? And we talked about the differences between worshiping the demigods and worshiping Krishna or God. Krishna means all attractive. It's the name for God. So we talked about how demigod worship can bring results, but those results are temporary, right? They're limited to this life or the demigod's planet. And then we juxtaposed that to how much is available in relationship with Krishna for us, right? This eternal relationship with him. So in today's class, we're moving to verse 24. That's where we're going to start. And we're going to address a deeper misunderstanding, even the demigod worship, which is impersonalism. So again, this is along the same thread of surrendering to something other than God. So impersonalism is like that everything's one. You know, it's like just God, the conception of God is just like a light. And in that it's just like everything is one. I'm God, you're God. It's all one. Right? So we're going to talk about a little bit about that conception. And again, always bringing it back to um to kind of comparing it to relationship with personality of the personal form of God, right? Personal form of God that's eternal, that's not temporary. So that's where we're going. And before we start, Shakti, do you want to say our prayers for us?
Smaya. Om Jnana Timirandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kara Mayam Dadati Sva Pandatikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Satjivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakat Vitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kancha Garungi Radhe Vrindavanishvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Prananami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Bhavembhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Guru Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Thank you. Thank you. Such a nice way to just orientate the class. It's beginning with these prayers of just appreciation for our teachers and our lineage. And it's even a good kind of lesson for us is even when we start anything, we start our days, we start any big task, right? In anything, just expressing gratitude for those that got us here, right? Those that we've learned from, that have been our teachers along the way, and acknowledging that. It also it lifts you up. Anybody else notice that? It just like makes you feel good. It's gratitude. It's like magical medicine. So, okay, we are going to start again, text 24. And Stella, when you're ready, I'll flash this up on the screen
Okay.
and could read for us.
Unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme.
Beautiful. Thank you. So in this verse, Krishna is making a really strong point. He's saying that some people think that his personal form is temporary. So in that, the conception here is that first there was just this impersonal Brahman, right? That's the impersonal conception of God, just like I was saying earlier. Everything's one, right? God's just a light. It's like an effulgence is God, right? And now the form of Krishna that he's taken on, right? They imagine that worshiping him is just like a stepping stone, a tool to get people to the real truth that's beyond the form, which is like impersonal and abstract. This is like one way of thinking in Vedic philosophy, in spiritual life. Right? Just the conception that God is just one. Right? And I will say in our lineage, we do acknowledge that conception of God, right? That everything is God. Yes, that's true. But at the same time, that's a partial understanding of God, a partial truth, right? Like just like God's the sun and God's rays are this impersonal conception that we're talking about. God's rays is like the effulgence, right? The rays of the sun. So if God's the sun, which is the form, the source of the rays, right? So he's the source of everything, and that's the form of Krishna. Right? But in this conception, it's that the rays are higher than the form, right? So the effulgence is really the highest, and the form is just a stepping stone to come to that realization that the effulgence, the rays of the sun, are actually the highest, right? Okay, but Krishna is clear that this is not an intelligent way to think, right? Because it reduces him, the Supreme Person, to something temporary, right? It suggests that love for Krishna is just a crutch, right? And that real advancement means going beyond love and relationships altogether. And the problem with this kind of thinking is that it robs people of the very essence of spiritual life, right? Which is love. Right? Because if everything's one, if I'm one, you're one, we're all one, there's no like reciprocal exchange, loving exchange there. Right? And love is like the I want to say meat and potatoes, but that is not a good analogy for this class. But it's like love is it. Love is it. Right? And so when we talk about like materialism, materialism distracts our love away from God. Right? But at least materialists are upfront, right? They're outright that worldly happiness is what matters. Right? They're like that's obviously what they're chasing. Right? But the danger with impersonalism is that it's even more dangerous because it disguises itself as spiritual progress, right? When it tells us that this devotion, it's just a step, and it's something to be discarded once we get there, once we've arrived, once we've advanced, right? Which is kind of like saying that food is just a temporary aid. Once you've matured, you don't need it anymore. Right? But we all know that the food is not a crutch. It's what keeps us alive. So if you stop eating, no matter how strong or intelligent you are, your body's going to waste away. Right? So in the same way, love for God isn't something to outgrow. It's not just like a stepping stone to get us to our final destination. No, it is our final destination, love for God. That's where we're going. That's the point of all of this. It's the real food for the soul, the real nourishment for the soul. Right? Without him, our inner life, it shrivels away. Right? And just like with food, we can make mistakes about what truly sustains us. Materialism is like trying to live on junk food. It's bright, it's flashy, it's tasty for the moment, but it leaves us weak and unsatisfied in the long run. So if that's like materialism for the body, impersonalism is like deciding that eating altogether is unnecessary, right? And that real strength is means going without food. But we all know starving, it's not transcendence, it's self-destruction. So that's why this Krishna-bhakti, love for God, bhakti is love and devotion for God, right? And Krishna is the name for God, the name that we call God. It means all attractive. One God. We all have one God. Whether you're Christian, whatever you are, one God. That's who we're talking about here. This is God, right? Love for God, it's real. It's nourishing food. Right? And it doesn't just keep the soul alive, it makes us flourish. It gives us strength, joy, purpose. Right? So this bhakti, it's not a stepping stone. It's the feast that the soul was created for. Right? So that's why this devotion to God, it's not transitional, it's the highest goal. Right? It's Krishna's form, his activities, his pastimes, they're not mundane, they're completely transcendental. And when we realize this, we can fully take shelter of him, right? And experience a spiritual happiness that's far beyond what either materialism or impersonal meditation can give. And I'll be honest with you guys, when I first came into yoga, I meditated on an impersonal form of God. That was like my way in. For like several years, I was meditating on this Soham mantra, right? And I found a lot of peace. I found it to be super peaceful. And I remember when I was in India and somebody gave me this Maha mantra, this mantra that's develops a personal relationship with God. To me, it was like a turbo boost. And it was like I'd been meditating with this Soham, I was meditating on the impersonal conception of God for years. So then when I switched to meditating on the personal conception of God, which means loving relationship, to me, it just that's what it felt like, just like a turbo in my life. And suddenly it was like fog that was in my life just started to kind of lift. I started to kind of like my priorities started to shift. It was so much easier and it felt happy, like joyful to connect with God. It didn't just feel peaceful, which is nice. Peace is nice, right? We all want peace, right? But like pure joy, right? That's like a level up from peace. Right? We want peace from suffering. Peace is pretty much just like, okay, the suffering is neutral, right? Suffering's gone. But then joy, that's like the next level up. And that's this personal reciprocal relationship with God that's available for all of us, right? So let's zoom in a little bit and talk a little bit more about this impersonal belief and why it may seem appealing at first glance, right? But ultimately fall short. Okay, so we establish what this impersonal belief is, right? It's this ultimate goal of spirituality is to merge into God, right? They think that God's this dazzling, all-pervading light, right? And the Gita teaches us that this desire to dissolve into God comes from a misunderstanding of his true nature, right? So the Gita calls these impersonalists unintelligent, okay, which might seem a little harsh, but because after all, they're trying to seek something beyond material pleasures, and that takes some intelligence, right? To say that, look, there's nothing here for me, to come to that realization, right? To see clearly that everyone and everything in the material world is imperfect and temporary, right? That insight is intelligent. But the problem is that they take that insight and they overgeneralize it, right? They assume that because all material beings are flawed, all persons in every way must be flawed. It's kind of like, you've dated, me in my 20s, I think I had like 8 boyfriends. It was like boyfriend after boyfriend. At the end, it was just like, this is such a waste of time. Boys suck. Right? That's where you get like, what's the point here? Right? But what happens in impersonalism is they extrapolate that kind of lived experience in this material existence to God. right? And so then they assume that the only way to ultimate peace is just to give up personal reality altogether, right? To merge into impersonal light. Like there's so much suffering that is going on in relationships that I'm not doing relationships anymore, right? Even with God, right? So and so the hope is that becoming part of this infinite light, they'll finally find lasting peace. But the Gita tells us that the mistake here is equating this one small slice of reality, like our imperfect experience, with the totality of reality, right? Which is that God is supreme. He is perfect in ways that we can't even imagine, right? He's personal, yet he's flawless. He has form, but he's unlimited, right? He engages in relationships with us, yet he's free from frustration. Right? So it's kind of like turns this material conception of relationships on its head. Right? But we have to understand and be able to open our minds up enough to know that that's available for us. Right? That this limited conception of relationships that we experience here in this material existence is just like, again, a perverted reflection. And this is also why it's important to have healthy relationships in spiritual life, because if we get so burnt out of all relationships that we're not even interested in one with God, that's a problem, right? We want to and have close relationships with people that kind of imbibe godly qualities, so that we can experience God's love through them, right? And in that way, we can understand a little bit, right? We can understand a little bit of God's love, but we should still understand that even that is fractional. Even that is fractional. What's available for us in supreme spiritual love, we can't even conceive of it. Right? But just because we can't conceive of it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And doesn't mean that we just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, no love for me, all is one. That's more comfortable. Right? And so the practice of bhakti yoga allows us to connect and experience that love. Right? And that's what we're doing here. Because the reality is, meditating on this formless conception, just we're all one, it's all light, it gives peace, it gives some level of peace and joy, some level, right? But it doesn't offer the full, the deep, fulfilling taste of love, relationship, and reciprocation that bhakti gives, right? And we all know, without that higher taste, right? Because we're beings of pleasure, where our soul's need is to love, right? That's our soul's nature. And if that's not fulfilled, right, we're going to look to fulfill it somewhere. And what ends up happening is the next shiny, bright thing that pops up in our material life, we hook onto, right? Maybe it be a person, maybe an animal, right? Because our soul's propensity is to love, and it needs to be fulfilled, and it will one way or the other. Right? So the point of this whole material existence is us to come figure that out, and figure out that, whoa, wow. Actually, nothing in this material existence fills that God-shaped hole in my heart. And most of us have experienced that to some degree, right? That's why we're here. It fulfills us to some extent, right? But not at its deepest yearning. And so in personalism, there's no reciprocal loving relationship there. Your soul's always going to long for it. And you're going to end up back in the material world looking for it. Right? So the truth is that God can't be understood through debate, study, mental gymnastics. Right? The Bhagavatam tells us that even a trace of Krishna's mercy can reveal more than a lifetime of speculation. Right? Just like a trace of Krishna's mercy can reveal more than a lifetime of studying. Right? And how do we receive that mercy? We receive that mercy through devotion, through chanting his names, through serving him, through developing relationship. That's when he reveals himself. Right? Just like you meet somebody, you go on a first date, they reveal themselves to you the more that trust is developed, that more that loving relationship is developed. Right? Just to like force somebody to reveal themselves to you, it doesn't work. Right? Or just to read about them. Okay, send me your bio. Send me your bio. I got it. Right? Like, how much do we really get? Right? By looking at somebody's, Hinge profile. A little bit. right? A little bit. You kind of get a doorway in, right? But until they really choose to reveal themselves to you, you don't really know them, right? And why do they choose to reveal themselves to you? Because they trust you, right? Because they feel safe, right? They feel like you are invested from a place of love, right? From a place of genuine care, right? So when we approach God from a place of genuine devotion, genuine care, not looking for anything, not like knocking on his door so that, he can fulfill our desires. No, but just genuine care. That's when he reveals himself to us. Right? And to the degree that we are personally invested, right? That our love is manifest, to that degree, God reveals himself. God gives us knowledge of him. More than we could get in a book. More than we could read in a book. More than any, and this is the way, right? And we see some kind of glimpse in this perverted reflection of spiritual reality and in this material existence. Right? But this is why impersonalists miss the mark. Right? They think that God's form, his qualities, his activities are just material illusions. Right? But the Gita tells us, it's very clear. Krishna's form is eternal. It's full of knowledge. It's full of bliss. Right? He's not formless. He's the source of all form. Right? He's the source of all form. He's the sun. Right? Everything, the effulgence, the light, it emanates from the source. Right? So he's not impersonal. He's the most complete and original person. So his point is simple and it's profound. His form is eternal. His nature is supreme. Right? His love is the ultimate goal of life. When we understand that, surrender becomes natural. Right? And that surrender is what takes us beyond the temporary into the eternal. Right? Okay, so that was a long spiel. I want to hear what you guys think. Any reflections on that? Or, have you guys ever thought that spiritual maturity means giving up relationships or love altogether? I kind of shared a little how I kind of thought that and how it was more comfortable. And sometimes I could even trick myself into feeling like, oh, form is limited, right? The form of God.
Yes, so I have something
Yeah,
to share.
yeah. Who is this? I'm looking for you.
Sorry.
Is this Maria? Oh,
Yeah, this is
Maria, good to
Maria.
see you.
You too. Yes, I took a personal vow of celibacy in the late 90s where I just put aside romantic relationships forever, but not because I had been hurt at all, because I was afraid I was hurting others because I couldn't commit. I was engaged like 14 times and I did marry twice, but would have to run to a justice of the peace. I just wasn't marriage prone. So I understand, but sometimes it's a thoughtful thing where you're considering others and you just don't want them to be hurt because you actually really love them. You just, you're not oriented in a certain direction. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't even think that like if you decide to not be in a relationship, that's a bad thing. It's not. Nothing's good or bad, but it's like it's more about where your mindset is. Like whether you're in a relationship or not, if your mindset is that like if you're really burnt, if you're really bitter, if you're really like we all know what that feels like, right? If you're really like resentful, if you have these kind of trauma wounds that like, somebody brushes against you and you just lash out, this is somebody that's like that's not going to be interested in a relationship with God, right? And not because not all the time, but this is what can happen because you're so burnt out that you're just like not interested. But even in the material world, a healthy place to get with relationships is yes, relationship is companionship. Like it's actually it's healthy for us. We need companionship. But we shouldn't expect that relationship to fulfill the God-shaped hole in our heart, right? We shouldn't be going to that relationship for our ultimate fulfillment and connection. Right? In fact, that
Definitely.
relationship should support our
Hmm.
relationship with God. Like is our relationship with God, and then those are relationships, even with a loved one, supports that ultimate relationship. And that's like really where we want things to be orientated in our spiritual life to give us to set us up for a relationship with God.
Definitely. From the first time that I came into contact with Krishna and really felt Krishna's energy, I was just in love. And I thought, this is everything I've been looking for in my life. And I was just so grateful that I came
Yeah.
upon it.
Yeah. And we even have to get to a point where we know relationships in this material world, yeah, don't will not ultimately fill us up.
Oh,
I
no.
had an experience
Yeah.
at work the other day. I was talking to this person, and they were telling me that they had met someone. They're divorced, they have kids. They were telling me they had met someone, and they were so excited. I mean, like I could see it all over their face. Like, and they were just like telling me about their plans this weekend, and they've been with this person for a month, and that's wonderful. Like, that's great. This is no problem. But again, the problem is that when we come into the illusion that we think, oh, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for my whole life. Like if this and it's finally here. It's finally here. Like this is an illusion, right? We all know this. Even when you think that, what's it going to look like in 10 years? You throw in a couple kids, it's like it's an illusion. It's going to feel like that at first because everything in the material world does. It's shiny, it's attractive, but it too is going to lose its taste a little bit. And that doesn't mean that you won't be in love or the love might mature or might not, but we should understand that this shiny, excited feeling that we have at the beginning of it, it's like it's an illusion, right? And the only way to keep that shiny, excited feeling is in relationship with God, right? Because that relationship is ever fresh. It is ever fresh. If you're continuing, if you're putting it in, if you're putting the work in, if you're showing up for your spiritual practice, if you're associating with devotees, if you're doing the practice, you'll be doing the same things in 20 years and it's going to feel ever fresh. Right? Find a relationship in the material world that's going to feel like that. And it's just not. It's just not. And that doesn't mean that we get bitter about it or we get mad about it, but we understand the real purpose of relationships in this material world, right? And that is to support our spiritual life, right? For God in the center, right? Grihasta ashram. You're married, God's in the center. And we're orientating everything around that. And that's where we're going to experience the ultimate joy and love and bliss, right?
Yeah, here, Radha.
Yeah. Is this Shakti?
Yes, it's me. I'm in the I feel like, can't you see me? I'm in the corner, but I know I pop around, right? You're like, um, so it's funny because not funny, but I was thinking about this the other day, and so many people, like, where I don't know if it's just where I live in Canada or if it's all over the place, but like people aren't getting married. Like they're getting together, and then they're like living together, and then they're moving on to the next shiny person, and it's like, you know, I, when I told someone, I'm like, yeah, I just celebrated 20 years married. And they were like, wow, that's great. That's this, that. And I thought, it's because George, my husband, he's not going to be, he's not shiny and fresh, and but we're in this companionship of love together, again, with God at the center, with Krishna at the center, with his support always, that I get, which is just beautiful. But you know life happens, and sometimes he's dull and sometimes I'm dull, and but the idea of that he's going to be keep getting shinier and shinier, and it's like, what, people, maybe oftentimes I find people, like, their businesses do well, and then they get richer, and then their whole life changes, but the people themselves live on two different sides of the house. So it's like finding that love really with God. And then if you have a companion, girl, boy, man, woman, whatever your companion, if you have a companion, whether you're married or not, if they're also putting God at the center, then then you can live in that eternal bliss. Like, that person can be your companion. You can find love from that, with God at the center. But if you're not doing that, then you're still in Maya. You're still in the illusion of this is eventually going to be something else.
Right. Yeah.
So then why, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and that was such a good point that you brought up. It's like the most satisfaction that we can derive even in our romantic relationships is in connection to God. Like that is what makes them ever fresh. That's
Mhm.
such a good point. Yeah, and I feel that way about my husband too. Like me, my 20-year-old self would have never married my husband. I would have been like, that is a boring relationship. Right? Because there's love, there's support, there's security. I would have been like, that's boring.
Yeah.
But because it's God's at the center and it's connected to God, it's ever fresh. I was just thinking about this weekend actually. Like my husband is my best friend because in that way, like we support each other in our spiritual lives, and then we have this child that we're raising together and connected to God. And that's what keeps it ever fresh. That's the only thing that's going to keep it ever fresh. Anything else is going to get stale, boring, resentful. Right?
And to that point, really quickly, I want to just add that I didn't add, but same thing, same. I would not have married my husband. I would have been like, oh, boring. Like, I'm going to the club, I'm doing this, I'm putting this and that, I have to be in fancy clothes and blah, blah. And you know what? Like, I'm like so happy that is not my life. Like, I'm just so grateful that somehow, somewhere, I did choose him because look at 20 years down the line, at least for me, I'm like, wow, like we're still like he's still support like we're still in that same glorious place and I'm still like I'm on on my calls. I got initiated. I'm going to see you in another month to do another training. Like I might go to India next year again. It's like all of these things and he's always like, "Yeah, you should do that, honey. It really fills you up." Okay, wow, like who are you? Like but I know who he is. Like you know who your
Yeah.
husband is, I know who he is, and I know that's just the person he is. And so how lucky, I feel so lucky because somewhere somehow Krishna's arrangement came in and said, "Okay, enough of that. Enough of this 8 boyfriends in a month, right? Enough of that,
Right.
whatever it was, right?"
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. This is the only thing that makes relationships anything is God at the center. If not, it's just entanglement, honestly. That's been my experience, and that's what scriptures teach us. Yeah, what do you think, Stella?
So, okay, so I'm the outlier here because I kind of never went through that whole like, I think I would have married my husband at 15,
Oh,
but I've never been outside of the protection of, my father or my fiance and or my now, my husband. And yeah, we've been together 45 years and the love is better than it's ever been. We're more in love than ever. And we have
wow.
God at the center. And I don't know, like I just never did any of that stuff. Not for lack of, I wasn't I mean, I wasn't not doing it because of some religious reason. Um it just I don't know, it didn't, I saw other people doing it and it didn't seem satisfying to them. So it was sort of like, why should I go through that?
Smart girl.
It was so yeah, so I don't know. It's I don't whatever path we arrive, that doesn't really matter. But
Hmm.
is that when you do commit, there's something about true commitment that allows you to go really, really deep. And really, really deep is where the nutrients are. And those
Hmm.
nutrients will just really fill, uh, you know, it's something where it's like if both people do have God at the center, we know there's something larger than the two of us.
Hmm.
And that is I mean I got really lucky. I mean finding my husband, but um we both, it's not like we didn't go through hard times, but there was never the question that we weren't gonna kind of stick it out
Yeah.
and just and figure out how can and it turns on, and always when we've turned for the better, it's when we've realized that we need to serve each other.
Hmm.
And when you start to only want to serve yourself, that's when a marriage can start to get really shaky.
Yeah.
And, like, and it's sometimes hard because sometimes it's, you feel like maybe my needs aren't being met, but you have to speak up. Like, and if, and show up, like, and then that trust develops more and more. Um, and it's funny because people were like, oh, you had 3 kids, the empty nest, that's a dangerous time. And we were like little kids again. Like we were like, teenagers again. We were like, yay, the kids are gone. It's just us. And it's just because
So wonderful.
you know, we, we can be alone together. Like actually value solitude, fill yourself, but there's the person to share it with. And amazingly, we have Krishna at the center, and
Yeah.
that is just everything. So
Secret
I don't
sauce.
know. I don't know. I just wanted to say that because for some reason we were very blessed with a lot of mercy.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Stella. Yeah, this marriage is such a, like, just like you said, it's such a container that, like, you're used to just serving yourself. But a good marriage, yeah, you're serving each other. And in that you learn, hey, look, I'm not the center. Right? And then throw a couple kids in the mix and it's like, wow, I am like so far from the center. And it's good for our spiritual lives, right? Because that's what we're trying to do in our spiritual lives is come to that realization that, look, I'm not the center. And then the real joy and satisfaction exists in serving the center. And the real joy and connection exists in service. And just like you said, we see that in marriage. So
And even
same
with kids,
principle.
you shouldn't even make kids the center.
Mm,
I think that's also like we always said to everybody, like our marriage is the center of the family, and the kids are just there around us. The kids are
mm,
going to come and go. Like the marriage is actually the most important thing. Not we serve our kids, but they weren't the gods of the house. And sometimes they'll complain to us about that. But um, you know, they're and we taught them to that the family is a vehicle for service, that
beautiful.
they had to serve the family as well as we serve them. And as they grew older, they understood what it was to serve. So, and be considerate
Beautiful.
and, but the marriage was the center. And as if the marriage is the center with Krishna at the center of that, like a little, the dolls
Yeah.
and, the kids feel safe because they know
Yeah.
this, the marriage is steady and is a foundation. And so they never feel anxious about their foundation,
Beautiful.
you know.
Beautiful. Thank you, Stella. So nice. This is, marriage, family lessons from Stella. 45 years married, 3 kids. Yeah. But the beautiful thing about spiritual life is if you're going the route where you don't have a family, where you don't have a husband, where you don't have kids, no problem. Right? No problem. You can still have, a strong relationship with God, if not a stronger relationship. Like there's no like, one size fits all. It's just whatever you got, using it in service to Krishna, right? Revolve, like if if you have a family, centering it around Krishna, right? If you're single, centering your life around Krishna. And in a lot of ways, it's easier to do that from some perspective. Right? So it's like, that's really what we're trying to do here is whatever we get, whatever blessings we get, whatever, material energy we come in contact with, we use it in service to Krishna, and in that way we spiritualize it, and in that way we connect with Krishna, and our relationship grows and we make spiritual progress. Yeah. Does anybody else want to share before we move on? Aaron.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all so much. Such beautiful relationships, and such wisdom. But I also like totally understand that there's so many people out there that don't have positive relationships. And I think when you were talking, Radha, I was like, oh, I kind of get why some people would be, inclined towards impersonalism if they've been burnt, too many times with personal relationships in this life. And I know that that's it is just a glimpse of reality, but it's like so theoretical in my mind because at the same time it's my only like experience that I'm cognizant of. So it feels like the totality, even though I know it's not. And balancing that knowledge and theory is hard. Um, but I also just wanted to say I really appreciate you bringing up that like impersonalism is still an aspect of Krishna and
Mm,
is still part of it because I really didn't understand that until a specific class that I was in where the speaker was talking about um, that is part of God and part of Krishna. Because when I was first reading everything, it's so anti-impersonalism and it felt like, okay, bad. So like put that in the bad column because that's how my mind works and everything has to be a dichotomy like that. Um, and so I just appreciate that it's more complicated than that. But I still kind of feel myself wondering, like, how do you honor that? Like, how do you honor the impersonalistic aspect of God, um, while like not going towards that aspect of God, or like
mm.
while still moving towards and prioritizing like the personal aspect.
Yeah. Wow, such profound realizations. And thank you for that. Yeah, we learn there's various aspects of God. One's this God is everywhere. Right? God is this light. That's like level one. And then level two is God is in the heart. Right? So God is in the heart of every living being. Right? This is like level two. And then like level three is there's a personal form of God that we can have a reciprocal relationship with. Right? That's like the highest realization of God. But just like you said, all of them, like are partial understandings of God, because God is infinite. Right? So all of them are partial understandings of God, and we can have. I mean, God is everywhere. God is everything. God is light. I mean, everything we see is God's energy, right? That effulgence is God's energy. So when we go about our days, everything is God, right? That's like beautiful. And think of how that can change our days as we go through our, material worlds and our material um material responsibilities, right? Everything is God. Everything is God's energy. Right? That's kind of like paradigm shifting. And if it's what to speak of if we actually interacted with it in that way, right? We understand that everything is God's energy. That being said, this God is a personal form and we have personal relationship with God. That's like paramount, right? Because we're relationship creatures. Right? We long to love and to be loved. So that relationship where we go about our days and we understand that God's looking out for us. He's our best friend. Everything that happens is for us. God's arranging, right, for us. And this way we get to have this reciprocal relationship with him. That I mean that's the highest. But that is not to say that, God in the heart and God is everything are not also very profound and high realizations, because they are. I mean, they're higher than materialism for sure, which is like everything here is for my enjoyment, let me get more, right? So, yeah, it's really beautiful how our relationship with God, we can have relationships with God. There's so many conceptions, so many. There's these three conceptions that we can connect with and we can experience in our everyday lives. Yeah, what do you think, Aaron?
Well, I think it's beautiful. I mean, I think it kind of really goes back to the last class about like, just God meeting everyone where they are and um, you know, just and I think Stella wrote, all of these different paths are, all just different ways up the mountain. Um, I guess it's just similar to last time. Like I just feel like when I first heard about or read about impersonalism, it just seemed like so harsh and so bad and so negative and like really not like what we're talking about here, which is like, being accepting and understanding and having compassion for people wherever they are in their path. And um, so, yeah, just I think for me, like coming to um, not balance those two things, but yeah, just think about it more of like why it's talked about so harshly. And I get that there's like context and history and there's a lot um, there, but then also like yeah, thinking about having having compassion for those who, are burnt out of relationships and just want peace. I don't
Mm. Yeah. And that conception of God, that itself is not like, I mean, that's a great thing. It's just that when that conception of God negates any other conceptions of God. So when you're saying we're all one, everything's light, and there's no personal form of God that's reciprocal, that's where it becomes, I think that's maybe why it gets kind of a bad rep, this impersonalism is like, because what happens is, just like I said, because our hearts are meant to love and to be loved, we're going to find that somewhere. And if you've said, okay, in spiritual life everything's one, you know you're not going to find it in spiritual life, so you're going to go to material life to find it, right? And we all know what happens when we go to material life to find it, right? And so that's why you just kind of end up on this cycle of you're looking for this, you're looking for your loved and to be loved, and there's nowhere to find it. It's like it's empty, it's bleak. Because spiritual life, no, we're all one, it's all light. Material life, we know that's only going to satisfy us, to some extent, and even that's going to be temporary. So it's like you never get to this get out of this circle. You're just up and down to realize that no, this actually exists with you in spiritual life because you've negated it, right? You've said it doesn't exist. All that is one. Right? So we have to get out of that circle so that we can realize the true longing of our soul, and that is personal relationship with God. So that's why impersonalism can be dangerous when it's limited to that conception and that conception only. Does that make sense? And that's why I think it gets a bad rep. But as a conception, it's beautiful. Yes, we should. God's energy is everywhere. We should see that. We should know that.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I feel like um, thank you for explaining that because I feel like, it's just my brain wanting like what's good and what's bad and then, you go a little bit deeper and it's like, oh, it's actually a little more nuanced and more complex. And then but I do think that it is helpful to also realize like there are aspects of impersonalism that are dangerous and why, right? Like so that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. But I get that for me, it was much more comfortable. It took me a while to like be comfortable with the personal conception of God because I was one of those people that like relationships were not good for me. Like any kind of like my friends, I felt a lot of betrayal when I was young. My family was like, meh, but to speak of my romantic relationships, it was just like not working out for me. So I was like, nope, this is good. It took a while. For me, this impersonal conception was a necessary stepping stone. When I look back on it, it's like that's what I needed at the time. But yeah, it can be very dangerous if you don't have the fortune of meeting devotees and learning how much more there is out there for us. It's like you just stay in the safe zone. You just stay in the safe zone. Like, there's like if you're a kid and there's only like three foods that you've ever tried and you never want to try more because you're afraid. You had a bad experience with something. You're like, yeah, not interested. So you mark it off. Right. But it's like then you never experience like anything other than, the three things that you've decided that you like. Right. It's like you have to be open a little bit. And to that, it's helpful if you have some healthy experiences to say, oh, I tried that once and it was good. Okay, I'm open. I'll try this again. Right? But if you tried it and it like gave you food poisoning, it's like, nope, I'm sticking to my three. Right?
I think people also feel fear if they've chosen a path to be like they cling to it because it's their identity,
Yes.
and then they're not open to it evolving because they're afraid of losing that too.
Yes.
They don't know what
Yes.
else is out there. I think a lot of what's wrong with the world's religion is the, my way or the highway kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, or they were raised like this, like I'm
Yeah.
just raised like this. This is all that I know.
Yeah.
And that's fine, just yeah, I totally agree.
Um, I just wanted to share, if I may, just with like Erin, like, well, first of all, there was a reason that Krishna's arrangement. I mean, even if that's not what you're thinking right now, like you were in Radha Prithi's retreat. That is an arrangement that is just wow, what luck to drop in and be with Radha Prithi, right? Was she in your retreat or no?
Yeah, yeah, she came to the retreat.
So, I mean, I feel that way because I just because I know her and I feel like what a blessing. But you know, like we're all in different places, right? So, like, just I don't know, just and like hold on to where you're at and just I guess just try and stay open to continuing to learn. That's it. Like don't like other people maybe have ideas or things and thoughts and try and like get everybody's ideas like because everyone has even when you're pregnant everyone's like, oh, you should eat this, oh, you should do that, oh, how come your belly's this big, oh, how come? And you're like, all right, everybody, thank you very much for all of your pregnancy advice. um and that's kind of what happens here with God or with finding this grounding. Like you seemed so grounded right now, and that's a great place to sort of just say, okay, I'm going to just open up and listen and hear and see what fits, see what feels right. And that's all you need to do. And that smile right there, like that's what I wanted to see that because I felt like for a minute you felt like it wasn't okay where you're at, but it's so okay where you're at. Like I know that Radha Priti, myself, when we met, we were both like in totally different place. She was dating her husband, I think 9 months, and we were talking. I mean, it was so long ago, but it was like it wasn't where we're at now. And it's like, so just, yeah, like you're in a great group of people, just I don't know, keep your mind open and that's it. And then you'll figure it out. Like whatever it is, it'll come to you, right? You're in such a great place and that smile is beautiful. So I love seeing it. Yeah. Thank you,
That's such
Erin.
good advice for all of us, Shakti. Because it's like I feel like that in the bhakti practice, it's so nice because there's just space. There's just space and there's just experimentation. And the experimentation is like the chanting, the kirtan, the association. We're experimenting with the process. And then we see the results and then we build faith. And then our path, and then we're kind of climbing in our path. But that's what it is, and that's why most of us are here. It's like I know most of us, like our families didn't practice. It's not like we were brought up in this, but it's like, oh, okay, I heard some things that made sense. I tried it on, and all right, and I'm coming back because I'm seeing its effects, and I'm liking where it's taken me, and that's it. It's like it's scientific in that way, and it's beautiful, and we're all connected, and that we're trying it out. We're trying it together. Yeah. Thank you. That was really nice, Shakti. Anybody else? Meg, how are you doing?
I am doing well, and I always love hearing everybody's message. Um, I've been married over 35 years, so the ups and downs. I get that, and I like quippy things like when you said space and experimentation. Like
Mm,
then I can remember it. And it's like sometimes I just don't remember some messages and stuff, but I get the drift of them. And but I just love hearing everybody's the words in the relationships and sometimes putting it into different words. Like I love the idea of raise, and I've always had God in the center. But we're all looking at relationships as part of it going towards it, as opposed to the relationships being the end all. And anytime you know, like I said, my husband and I aren't necessarily on the same page spiritually, but in other ways we are. And so it's enough that, still keeps us going. But I just like the message, and I like hearing it in a different frame of words. It just helps me interpret it and put deeper meaning into it. And at this stage of my life, in addition to that, is I'm finally able to get a deeper relationship with my sisters because everybody was in their own place. And so now, and it's keeping God first. And I've tried to do that with my marriage, but I didn't always think to do it with my friends. And I would think of what's our commonality or something. But so it's helped with relationships with my sisters, and I'm blessed there. So
That's
I love the fact that everybody shows up for this, and thank you.
Thank you. Such nice realizations. Thank you. And yeah, that's such a good point. God could be the center of any relationships with our friends. I think my strongest friend relationships I have right now are because God is at the center. Before that, just like you said, it's like, oh, we have a commonality. Okay, now we don't. So now we don't talk. It's like, yeah, when God's the center, everything. So yeah, Brittany's clapping her hands. Brittany, that's how I feel about you.
Same girl, same. And I think it took me a little while before I realized that most of my relationships, when they're not God-centered, are incredibly superficial. And you take the little thing away, like drinking or something, and you don't really have much in common.
Yeah.
And or something major happens. And when God's not the center, I find that sangha, that sense of community, isn't there either.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So true. That's a secret sauce for strong relationships in this life. It's God at the center. It's the only way. What do you think, Katie? You're on camera now.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks. I just a quick one. So my brother is uh, a Catholic, a practicing Catholic, and he was really far from religion for a long time, and then came back to our, the one we grew up in, and we just have like when we greet each other, and say, "Hi, how are you?" He nowadays he always says, "Blessed by the Lord, blessed by the Lord." And we just have this like moment together where I'm like, oh, and then sometimes I started saying blessed by the best, which I forget who I got that from. And it's just such a nice connection and reminder that like when God, and I'm so glad that in Bhakti we accept and you know involve have relationships, deep relationships with people, a lot of our husbands in different faiths and stuff. um but it's just that reminder that like when God's at the center, it's so powerful, and it really helps the perspective and the like mental drain or emotional strain of getting so swept up in like, well, actually today was crappy or blah, but um yeah, it just was a memory I thought would be nice to share. And I also feel like back a ways in the conversation, when we were thinking about like getting the bigger house and then ending up on different sides of the house and this and that, like we have this thing at work that one of the core values is continuous improvement drives us or something. But it's just like so materialistic and actually pretty false, and I realized like it ends up being like, well, like I was bringing up, we didn't have ice over the summer and we work outside. And when I brought that up, they're like, well, we used to not even have water fountains for visitors, and we put them in years ago, and they're like half a mile away. And I'm like, oh my God, great. Mention your continuous improvement, but that completely misses the point. It's like sometimes if we have a different center, we end up kind of like having these false examples, that are like, well, I can give one example of I'm still on a continuous path. And actually it's like
We
forgetting
really make it about
humanity.
ourselves.
What?
Right. We really are making it about ourselves still.
Yeah, and making it like really miss the point and not hear others. And yeah, so I just think like it's so helpful to realize like we don't need to strive to have like the most exciting relationship, the one that's always changing or growing or being more and more exciting. And really, that's kind of a little bit of a lie to ourselves sometimes, you know? And then the other thing that I was having a nice time remembering was like, in my journey of growing up Catholic and then having some trauma and then getting into yoga, like more asana yoga. And I've shared with you guys before, like kirtan would be just a few times a year. And I'd be like, what is happening here? Like I loved kirtan before I even knew, like, even we were like had the thought awareness, like this is chanting God's names over and over, you know? And, and then like, when I finally really started to learn about bhakti, I was so blessed. Um, and I started to get into a Gita study group that was much more brief and kind of like snippets, like highlights. And it was near the end with Hari Kirtan Das. And, you know, and then kind of like Krishna is our friend. He's available right now. And I was like, you know, and it was just such funny timing because when I first got in, it was like we're talking about like the culmination, the main tenets of at the end of the Gita, you know, and I was like, this is it. And I used to think to myself, like, okay, we have like, you know, hatha yoga paths, and we can work on our pranayama, or we can, you know, have different paths, and I would just kind of think, I don't know why exactly, but I kind of equated it in my like, not, this probably isn't totally right, but like I was like, this feels like kind of like a Baptist path of I believe now, like this is available now, you know what I mean? Like I'm gonna keep taking steps to make it more and more full in my life and be more aware. But it was such a joyous like I felt like this is what been looking for, like okay, you say this available now, this is the feeling that I've been getting, and not knowing like what path is like gonna really help me. And so when I first got to bhakti, I was like, this is it. I've been like searching for the one that really has the personal relationship. um wow, Erin, you too, that's amazing. Hard kirtan, yeah. um yeah, so those three different kind of separate things were kind of flowing through my mind this class. um and I think it just really helps me a lot, you know. And I've certainly had the time frame in the past where it's like, okay, focus on your breath, focus on a candle flame, like, you know, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, kind of
Yeah.
trying to explore there. And um it's just so joyful. I think it's really kind of like been just the one that um uh just makes me feel the most joy, you know. And
Yeah.
that's something we can really lean on to be infectious, just being around others. And I love that moment with my brother, and we're the only ones who do it, even though our
Yeah.
parents are very, very spiritual, you know, and this and that. And like it's just like this moment where we're like, yep, we know he's the center, and it's okay, everything's okay. So it's so
So
good.
amazing. You're
Thanks.
blessed. Such nice realizations. My fellow meditation sister. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you all. Well, I think our time is up, but it was so joyful being here with you all and discussing these topics. And thanks for showing up and doing the work, and coming and participating. You know, this participation makes all the difference. I hope for you guys too. But when we talk about these things and they become real and live, they stay with us longer, right? And they show up in our lives as we move around. So thanks for coming and being so sincere. And I'll see you all Thursday. See you all Thursday.